Good morning, everyone. We are just about to start the session. But yes, for all of you who have joined us, thank you for joining us today. You can drop your name and your organization's name in the chat to introduce yourself. And if you have any questions, you can use the Q&A chat box. Shannon, I'm just going to get started. Happy Monday and welcome to the Happy Heat Pump Water Heater Week kickoff session. Today, our conversation is going to be very simple. We are going to talk about how to make energy not just accessible, but also affordable. But before we dive into the details of what the session is about today, I want to give like a big shout out to our supporter, San Diego Learn. It's a San Diego-based workforce education and training program that is partnered with New Buildings Institute to offer free energy efficiency and electrification webinars. In case you're interested to know more about this organization and their work, you can log into this link and get all the information. Before we dive into all the details of what this session is about today, I want to give a quick roundup of all the events leading up to Heat Pump Water Heater Week and the ways that you could participate and add a creative touch to it. In case you have not registered for the Heat Pump Water Heater Day, which is on Thursday, I would say do it now. And in case you're not aware of all the sessions that we have planned later in the day today, on Tuesday as well as on Wednesday, I would say please do check this link out right on the slide, and you can have all the information on the programs, session, panelist, and details of what the session is going to be and the times as well. So don't forget to register. We want to see you there, and we'd love to have you join us for the celebration. And while you do so, in case you want to give a shout out or show your love to heat pump water heaters, you can have some ready-made posts available and you can use our social press kit. So here's the link as well as the QR code. And if you like, when you're posting it, you could use the hashtag heat pump water heater day or go heat pump water heaters. Make a small video and show some creative, cool way of how you would want to involve heat pump water heaters in your everyday life. And you never know, while you're doing so, a heat pump water heater might be right outside your doorstep. So do join us for this free giveaway hamper and win a heat pump water heater. And in case you want to add a very personal touch to Heat Pump Water Heater Day celebration, I would encourage you all to create a badge. I did mine. I'm a Chauvinist researcher, and my Heat Pump Water Heater teacup is brewing. And the session that is brewing with today is about, as I mentioned earlier, making energy not just accessible, but affordable. You must have heard or like attended a lot of other sessions where we talk about the technical aspects of heat pump water heaters, installation challenges, the complexities, all the technical know-hows that you should know about when it comes to heat pump water heaters. But when you're executing a project, if it's a retrofit or trying to install a heat pump water heater in a new construction, residential or commercial, that is a technical part. That's one side of the coin. But then there's another side of the coin, which is a non-technical part. There are different players who are involved in putting this project together, making sure that from the start till the end, everyone is involved in different ways. So today I wanted to give a shout out and a platform to one such player who are on the other side of the technical chat, but do a lot of work when it comes to heat pump water heaters in multifamily buildings or residential spaces. So please join me in welcoming housing providers, and specifically affordable housing providers. Anish Masari from Tacoma Housing Authority, Michael Burton from Pickadike, Lauren Westernmoreland from Stewards of Affordable Housing for the Future. And I'm so glad to have you all here today join us for this really simple conversation on making energy not just accessible, but affordable. On this note, I would like to invite my first panelist, Michael, to please come online. It's like let's take the chat forward about how affordable housing providers um, step into this role of executing a really big building electrification project. What are the challenges that you have come across? What is something that, as a best practice, you would like to share with our participants today? And while you do so, Michael, I would like to just give a note to all our participants. Please use the Q&A chat box in case you have any questions. If you like, put it in the general chat. We might lose track of the questions. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody from Chicago, or afternoon if you're on the East Coast. We're all excited, all the panelists are, and especially I am, to kick off Heat Pump Water Heater Day and Week with some really cool projects to share with you. I'm going to share one that we did in Chicago that's up and running. And here it comes. This is La Paz Place in Chicago. It's in the Logan Square area. And I'm going to go through how let me go back one. But first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Bickerdike Redevelopment Corporation. We are the owner of La Paz Place. Bickerdike started 58 years ago on the north side of Chicago. We're a community-based, not-for-profit. We have 500 individual members and 44 organizational members. We've developed and we manage about 1,200 units of affordable housing in 145 buildings on Chicago's north side. So we've done a lot of different housing projects. And a lot of our projects were actually developed in the 80s and 90s and aughts, and they're older projects now. We've actually had a partnership with Elevate for the last 15 years or so to retrofit a lot of those projects. And this is a table showing how we've been able to, and they've done a good job of bringing funds and bringing expertise to help us do all sorts of things like adding insulation and solar in some cases and fixtures and things like that to make our older projects greener. And that's sort of how La Paz is in that whole, and they've helped us do retrofits in over 400 of our older units and sort of bring them up to better standards operating as far as environmental and efficiency. So we're very excited to always work with them. La Paz, we acquired these 3 buildings in the Logan Square neighborhood of Chicago back in 1999. And it's sort of typical of a lot of Bickerdike projects and how they come to be. Often the community, people in the community will say, hey, we've got a problem. Can Bickerdike come and help us? Because we have a reputation for taking on sometimes difficult buildings. So these are 3 buildings within a couple block area. There was drug dealing and gang activity. And we acquired the buildings. We were able to move out anybody that had a lease and rehab the buildings and move everyone back in 2000, 2001. And we've operated it ever since as quality affordable housing. And these are 3 vintage buildings, as you can see from the picture, that were built in the 20s in Chicago. Really nice big apartments, a lot of 2s, 3s, and even 4-bedroom apartments. So it's family housing. And there's 44 units altogether in the 3 buildings. It's affordable to families at 50% of the area median income. We received an award after we redeveloped these projects back in 2001, 2002 from the Chicago Board of Realtors. We got the Good Neighbor Award for turning these buildings around. And personally, I live 2 blocks from these buildings, and I bought a place about 20 years ago, and it's a great neighborhood, still diverse because of Bickerdike and some other groups in the area. And it's a great neighborhood, so it's great to have affordability built in. So the building electrification project at La Paz started in 2020, and it was a cooperative project between Elevate and Rocky Mountain Institute. And we did a bunch of planning with others too, ComEd, and some other professionals. And the goal was to electrify an existing uh, affordable housing project. And we identified our La Paz project, and there were a lot of meetings. A lot of it went through the pandemic, so we did a lot of online meetings and figured it out via Zoom, like we're doing now. And the project is actually complete electrification. Originally, it had gas heat and gas stoves and gas hot water heaters. Um, and it, you know, uh, Electric heat pumps were sort of a new idea in some ways in this climate for retrofitting older buildings like this. Um, so we, this included all of those. We actually, with Elevate, an important part was educating the tenants. When you're doing a retrofit, you have tenants in place, right? And you need to keep them. You need to let them know what's going on and get their buy-in, because there's going to be bumps in the road anytime you're doing this. And this is a meeting we had in back at two of the buildings. You can see we all had our masks on because we were diligent about the pandemic at that time. And this is the same building on the right with the HVAC. You can see the heat pumps, and you can see our Chicago skyline in the distance. We're very proud of our skyline in Chicago, and we've got lots of other things to be proud of too. So, there's some people that are saying bad things about Chicago now. Don't believe them all. That's all I got to say about that. I won't go too far into that. But I want to drill down more into, part of the electrification was obviously like I said, the heat pump HVAC. And we were able to get funding too from the funder that Elevate arranged was a private funder. We don't even know who it was, but they were very interested in trying this application in affordable multifamily housing, a retrofit. And so it included the electric HVAC, electric stoves, and also heat pump hot water heaters. So we did first we had to upgrade electricity in all three buildings, and we did the heat pump HVAC first, and then and the stoves. Because it was in place, we really, the tenants went without a stove for a couple of days, and we got families, so we were able to help them out with some gift certificates so they could eat out those days, and having them as partners, that really helped in getting their buy-in. Another thing we got afterwards was we got some funding for solar photovoltaic panels, and these are our first photovoltaic panels in our portfolio as well. And they're powering the heat pump hot water heaters and the common area lighting in the project. So sort of drill down into the heat pump hot water heaters, and uh, it, some of the lessons we learned in the other parts of the electrification is this is our first building with electric HVAC and heat pump HVAC. And, one of the things we learned was that, the systems don't tend to have as many BTUs, they're not as powerful. So you can't sort of oversize very easily. In the first winter, we realized that some of the old windows, the top sashes were coming down. So we had to go through and secure all those, because if you get any infiltration of cold air, you have to, you don't really have a lot of excess power to heat. So, but once we sort of worked out those wrinkles, the heat pumps HVAC worked out fine, and just had to tighten up the units a little more, which is great. And we've done that in subsequent applications like this too, just making sure the units are tight, which is great. We're into that. That's an important thing. And the last thing we did was which was a bit more of a new thing, was the heat pump hot water heaters in in this climate and in a retrofitting in a multifamily affordable housing. We were very excited to have Captain Heat Pump Hot Water Heater come and visit after we got our installation in. And this is a picture here. And this is Bill Lyons in one of our rooms here, and you can see our heat pump hot water heaters. Bill is with Elevate, and he's one of the engineers, and it's good to have partners like him because he's one of the commissioning people, but he goes way beyond that. He's helped us really figure out, how these systems work and how we can come over any problems that arise. And so we did one building of the three first with the heat pump hot water heaters. You can see they're Bradford White. And they're hybrid, the hybrid units on the top of the hot water heaters there, and that there's a heat pump and there's also resistance heat. And when they first went in, we had issues. Bill likes to say sometimes we're on the bleeding edge, not the cutting edge, but the bleeding edge. And we did have some cold water events, which was a problem. And we enlisted the residents to really keep close contact with us so we could monitor exactly what was going on. And there just wasn't enough capacity with the system. What was done is there's 4 Bradford White hybrid units here. One of the hybrid units was disengaged, and we got the 2 Senko units you can see to increase the capacity of the heat pumps. That really helped. And we also added a 200-gallon hot water storage tank. So that really helped. And, the hot water or the cold water events became a thing of the past. So that was good. And we then move forward at our other 2 buildings with the similar setup. And it was good having partners like Elevate and the unnamed funder who were able to work with us. And, when we needed to change and add to the equipment that we had here, they were able to cover the cost, which was fantastic. And, everyone wanted this to succeed and figure out how to do it. It was good having partners that had the same vision. 1 year of monitoring has been part of the grant. We're past that period, and Elevate has arranged to continue the monitoring. Bill is still on top of that, so we can really see how it's all working and keep the system in top shape, which is great. Since this project, we have in our new projects, we typically develop a new project, new construction project now every year or 2. We haven't done a rehab in a while, other than ones that are in our own portfolio. We now do the heat pump HVAC, and electrical stoves are now our sort of standard. And our next project, we will be doing a heat pump hot water heater in, which is very exciting. It has changed the way we do our work, and we're very excited about that. And so I guess lessons learned for us was having really strong partners that can help us figure out and navigate any bumps in the road to really, being a retrofit, being occupied units, engaging the tenants. So the real benefit that the residents got out of this whole project was, we originally developed these buildings back in the early aughts. We did not have central air as a standard feature. So people had window units that they would bring. And, the city has gotten hotter, and in the past 25 years, now central AC has really become sort of a standard. the residents were very excited to get central air conditioning. They were also very excited to get the stoves. At first, they were a little apprehensive about the electric stoves, but we got really good ones that boil water faster than the gas, so they're very happy about that. Um, it looks like the efficiency is down, so I think their bills are a little less, but we're still working through that. Yeah, I think having good partners, especially in a retrofit, is important. And from the owner side, I'll have to say having a partner like Elevate that actually coordinated all the funding and commissioning and the expertise was fantastic. We develop our own housing and we have an in-house construction but department, but having someone who really specializes in this type of thing on the funding and on implementation and construction and the commissioning side as a partner was really great. So I think that's what I got.
Thank you so much, Michael. That was fantastic. And we do have some questions in the chat, one of which I would definitely like to take it up during the Q&A session on justifying the financial numbers when you're making this transition to clean energy, because I believe my other panelists will also have some insight to add to it. So, Bob, we will take up your questions towards the end. But just a quick question, Michael. One of our participants just wants to confirm that you did convert all of the fossil fuel equipments to electric.
We
For,
did. These are 100% electric buildings now.
and
And
how many unit tons cost? That is one another question from Drew.
how much per unit cost?
Uh-huh.
I don't have that number in front of me. I can look it up during
Sure.
the other.
No problem. No problem. But
Yeah. It
Michael, thank
wasn't, and the bottom line is it's not cheap. This technology
you.
is much more expensive, as we all know, than 100% gas. But I can get you a number on that.
Sure, Michael. And we will definitely chat more about the financial resources and the expense towards the end. But thank you so much, Michael, for joining us. Please stay with us for the Q&A session. But let's now welcome our next panelist, Aneet Masari from Tacoma Housing Authority. While Michael gave us an overview of what it is like in retrofit buildings, integrating a project, and I always thought like in the beginning that, probably it's much easier for new construction. But then, is it? So my next panelist, Aneet, is going to help us understand like the challenges and some of the benefit factors that come with integrating a heat pump water heater in new construction. Welcome, Aneet. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Yes, hi everybody. My name is Annette Masari. I work at the Tacoma Housing Tacoma Housing Authority in the Pacific Northwest, Washington State, and I'll be talking today about a new build rather than a retrofit. And it's these two buildings here, our Housing Hilltop project, north and south. Okay, so just to go over sort of the structure of this talk, I'll talk a little bit about the building and then the heat pump systems themselves, sort of what the idea was going in, our goals, sort of what eased the way, which will be a theme for me, is the sort of rebate programs and other support we had, some details about how they're going now that it's implemented, and just some high-level takeaways from this perspective. So the project is a 231 unit project across both buildings. There's 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, and also some 3-bedroom townhomes with street level access. These are 4% tax credit projects, which is a way of saying that it's a complicated financing structure. Um, we have sort of all of the bells and whistles and apparatuses that goes with a tax credit project, and then 4%, there's a large amount of gap financing required. So that was going to affect some of the maybe ways of thinking about the cost of these units, these heat pump water heater units. And they're brand new. They were constructed from 23 to 24, and they have been fully leased up as of 2025. So the units, the heat pump water heater units that we have in these buildings, you could kind of say it's a modular system, a Sanco, but you can see the heat pumps on these lower images. We have lots of smaller heat pumps rather than say 3 to 4, or maybe with our south building, which is a bit smaller, 2 to 3 larger heat pump units. And and the storage tanks. I think that I will say that I came onto the team mid-construction. So some of the decision making about why we went with the maybe more modular system, I wasn't at that table at the time, but I can say that, just logically, it's a lot more affordable, right, to swap out one of these heat pumps if needed rather than having to get a whole new larger unit. Perhaps maybe some of the maintenance would be easier on smaller units. I think that was some of the thinking that went into this design. In a retrofit, you have very limited space to put in these new pumps and tanks and everything. New construction, you are more flexible. But I will say that if you have a big unit, a big heat pump unit, you probably need somewhere dedicated, right? Because these need airflow. If they're larger units, they're often sort of behind a chain link fence. So you can kind of see in this photo that this is in our parking garage. They're a bit exposed, and depending on where these units are and what population you're housing, that might be something to consider if you want them exposed like this, or if you need them to be a little bit more protected. So some risks, obviously the cost. Each of these buildings had hundreds of thousands of dollars put into just the heat pump water system. If I haven't mentioned before, it's a building-wide system. Uh, there's also a lot of unknowns, right? It's a very technical process. You need engineers on the team designing it to meet your needs, and I think you need, I mean, might be not a requirement, but I would say you need a third party to commission that to make sure it's performing as needed. And that's sort of my last point here about that's an additional expense. And then the maintenance cost. So once it's implemented, do you have staff or contractors that you work with that know how to service these? And is there going to be a premium associated with that? Those were all sort of in the ether, right? But the opportunity is to understand if one of these new systems is going to give us significant energy savings, which is code for cost savings, that makes it worth implementing at other properties. And these sort of risks appear significantly mitigated by the rebate programs that were available in our sort of local area. That is signified a funding source that made sort of the risk an easier pill to swallow. So what's not considered energy efficiencies. So I want to say there wasn't a big theme about these buildings being sort of LEED or other type of certification of energy efficiency. It wasn't sort of a part of the project story or identity to be energy efficient. I mean, there was lots of aspects of efficiency we wanted to incorporate because of, well, I guess I should say it's part of the story as far as making the best building we can, right? Having the best experience for residents, but not that we were sort of pursuing one of those sort of formal labels. And another thing that wasn't really on the table was that those rebates I mentioned and also the sort of lower energy costs that we could expect were not factored into the underwriting. So going back to like, what does the financial picture look like for these buildings? We weren't sort of banking on grant sources or lower operating costs as a way to make for lower costs in the financing structure. Okay, so if you have money that's going to come in later, or if you have lower operating costs, a lot of times that means that you can also charge lower rent, or you can cover a larger mortgage, a larger loan. Okay, so the financial advantages that went into this were not sort of going all the way into that calculation. Um, And then this page is meant to signify basically how many players and how complex the support was behind this project. So we had these rebates I keep referring to, but a lot of them we're dependent on how the system performs. So you can have sort of maybe a target amount that you're expected to receive in funding, but it's going to be sort of plus or minus based on how energy efficient the system actually ends up being once you're occupied, your building's occupied. And so both the sort of rebate contract and the measurement and verification contract was largely managed by our local Tacoma Power. Okay, that was a huge advantage, big weight lifted off of us as owners, the fact that Tacoma Power was like leading this entire project. So we were contracted with them as far as the rebates go. They were a funder in that regard as well as two other sources. And then there was an additional contract for the measurement and verification between Bonneville and Ecotope, which was funded by Bonneville BPA. So there's as Michael was saying, a lot of people at the table, right, making these things happen. And I hope that that may be true in your area for some time as these new systems get more prevalent. Okay, so implementation, how did it go? I think thanks in large part to the commissioning during the install, it's performing as expected. These efficiency rates for the technical people out there will understand between 2 to 5 COP. Again, the commissioning, I think, is a big part of that. User experience, most of this is out of sight, out of mind. I don't think our tenants are aware at all. There was one cold water event just due to a pump intake failure that was sort of one of those one-off warranty type events, and it was quickly resolved. And the cost savings to be seen. So as far as how much savings our tenants are seeing and the building is seeing, property management, we're a little bit too soon, I think, after lease up with too many other larger sort of variables in the mix to kind of make that comparison. And maintenance is again pretty early. So a modular system does need regular oversight. There's sort of, as our commissioning engineer would say, kinks to be worked out or wrinkles to iron out. There's frequently like little error codes that come in and then they might even stop running. And so they need to be sort of checked on daily to just see if a quick reset is required or something bigger. And with lots of little systems, you might be doing that more often or for longer. However, as I said, the modular system has easier component replacement if we have any sort of larger type, you know, things that need to be resolved. And the takeaways. So that modular system, as I just said, regular monitoring. I mean, someone should be checking on those every day for a little beeping or chirping. We have had 2 pumps go offline and no one in the building noticed, but of course that's probably taxing to the other systems and maybe just a matter of time. You need to be visiting them regularly. However, those wrinkles are minor and have been easy to iron out, and everything is coming up so far in the warranty period. Again, consider your space and layout and exposure to tampering, and also airflow is important. And the temperature of the air flowing in is also important. Funding compliance. So this happened to be a design build lump sum bid project, which meant that the detailed costs of the heat pump water heaters themselves were rolled up quite significantly. And as affordable housers know, there's lots of funding compliance rules that we're used to. So just bear in mind that if you have a rebate program or grant, that's another example where you might need to say, produce detailed invoicing to show the cost of the system in order to get your rebate. And so I just recommend you read your fine print and be on the same page with all those parties at the start of the project so that you know what you have to track. And again, measurement and verification is often a part of those rebates. So how are you coordinating that in terms of either funding, contracting, and even just like property management and access to the building? So a big takeaway I hope you're hearing is that skilled support is important. Third-party commissioning, measurement and verification, right? You need someone with that technical know-how verifying that everything is as optimal as it can be. And I just want to say a big thanks to our owner's consultant Bronner, Walsh Construction, who completed these buildings early, Ecotope, who did our commissioning and measurement verification, and again, of course, TPU, Tacoma Power, and all of our funders.
Thank you.
Fadisha, do I have questions?
Yes, you do, Anita.
Okay.
Questions. But I will acknowledge you and Michael both to sort of like check the Q&A. But yes, I would like to highlight, thank you so much for the presentation, first of all, Anit. It was fantastic for all the detailed overview. And the fact that you mentioned, like Michael mentioned about stakeholder engagement importance, you brought in how utility, like a local area utility would play an important role in these projects with rebates and incentives, and that these rebates and incentives would not be covering a maintenance, which is a requirement post installation. Like, the hero of the story is like installing a heat pump water heater, but then what happens after that? You have to make sure the system is running efficiently, it is doing the job for which it was installed. So yes, that was the highlight from Anit's presentation. I do have one quick question here, Anit. Someone wanted to know, like, why is it in garage, like parking space, like no, not parking space, and why not in unit? So I will answer on behalf of Anit because I was also involved in this project. Given the building type, if you do not have like a particular space, like an outdoor closet or a patio or a balcony where you can install an in-unit heat pump water heater, you would really prefer to have them in the garage space, like, to save the living space. If you have it inside in an interior closet, it would just take up a lot of space. And then there's a lot of logistics that goes behind, like trying to make sure there's enough space for like dehumidification or for the airflow and ventilation. So that was one of the reasons why they went in with the parking garage in this case. Also, Nick, another question I would definitely also like to highlight is the complexity of different players, as you mentioned. Although it was crucial to have them in the project, but at the same time, it also becomes really difficult for managing. Like, having everyone do the monitoring verification, setting these things up, and the post maintenance. That was also one of the highlights. We do have other questions in the Q&A chat, and I would really encourage you to have a look at them. But let's thank Anit for her wonderful presentation. And Anit and I are now going to invite our final panelist for the day, Lauren, from Stewards of Affordable Housing for the Future. Lauren, I got this right finally. So welcome, Lauren. Michael gave us an overview of the retrofit scenario. Anit talked about new construction. So it's a seesaw, and I look forward to you to balance this seesaw with the retrofit and new construction, and what new facet do you think comes into play in this area? Anit talked about utilities. Michael talked about funding sources at different stages where different stakeholder engagement was crucial. So over to you, Lauren.
Great. Thank you. And thanks so much for having me here today. I'm Lauren Westmoreland. I'm with, let me advance my slide here. There we go. I'm with Stewards of Affordable Housing for the Future, also known as SAFE. We are a collaborative of 13 of the leading nonprofit affordable housing owners, and we're in about 49 states. This represents almost 2,000 or 2,100 properties and more than 1,000, I'm sorry, 150,000 units of multifamily affordable housing. So through that, we've been able to see a lot of what our members are experiencing. They are both managing existing affordable housing, renovating housing, as well as building new construction. And through that, they've been doing a lot of work in this space. Back in 2013, our members made a commitment to reduce their energy and water usage by 20% by 2020. We called it the Big Reach. They actually accomplished it, even surpassing their goal, which was to hit 29% energy savings, 24% water savings. So you can see from this that this is something that they're committed to. And then through that, they're finding different ways to be innovative in this space. And one of the things that they're really trying to be innovative right now, both on a voluntary and a mandatory basis, is working on electrification. And part of that is trying to figure out how to electrify hot water. And the reason that we see that a lot is because of a lot of our members serve urban areas and senior housing. And in a lot of those cases, water heating is centralized. So they're looking for solutions in order to address that. So I'm going to go through a couple of different examples and how they're doing this. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly as well. I am going to throw into the chat several different case studies that get into more details around what our members have done. This is an emerging technology for them. So even though we know heat pump hot water heaters have been in place in single family for a while, in fact, I've owned one myself since 2014, it's a little bit more difficult in multifamily housing. So even though, you know, it seems like it should be an applied practice by now, we're still learning. And so some of the examples I'm going to provide are going to be great ways to think about where we can go in the future. So I'm going to start with one of our members, Preservation of Affordable Housing, also known as POA. They're based out of Boston, Massachusetts, but are spread across the country, in particular, east of the Mississippi. And they have built several passive house projects at this point and have worked on electrifying hot water heating to the point of which they have started to specify this for any of their design teams that they're working with. And they also provide this resource that I'm showing on the screen for maintenance staff as well. This is called their basis of design. And I'm going to put the link to it in the chat because it's available for free online. And basically what it is it's a set of their design specifications. And they put this together to basically tell anyone coming on board, the first thing we want you to do is to evaluate if you can electrify the hot water system. So how do we make sure that we're starting from the beginning? Give us a high level analysis and then really share, like, if you think that that's not something you can do, like why you can't do it. So getting the architects and engineers to think from the beginning around how they do this. And here is the link now. So you can take a look at it yourself. And this is really important because we need design teams thinking about this from the front and being forced to do that research, because if they aren't, you know, timing is often tight. There's never enough hours aside for contracts in order to actually like do this type of research. So having this in place as an initial discussion point has been really important for them. So now that we've talked about thinking about it from the start of a project, let's talk about some actual projects that have happened. So the first one I'm going to talk about is in California. This is our member Mercy Housing. They have a large portfolio in California and have been looking at ways to ensure that they're both going to be in compliance with forthcoming regulations, as well as take advantage of the great incentives that are in place in California. So in this case, this is a project where it's in San Francisco. It's a smaller senior property. And they went through an electrification project. So prior to this, they had some laundry equipment as well as hot water that was gas fired, in unit electrical or in unit radiant heating in the ceiling. You can imagine how well that worked. And there was no air conditioning. So in this case, you know, why did it work to electrify this? Well, to start with, because the building was well serviced, as far as electrical capacity goes, it was really easy to actually make the necessary upgrades to do so. So in this case, the electrical panel was located fairly close to where they were going to install or replace the gas water heater and put in a heat pump water heater. And then also within the units, just service in general to the building was pretty high. And through the sort of combination of doing that electrification work inside as well as the electrification work for the centralized water heating, they were able to amass enough incentives that made the project cost effective for the owner to pull some of that money out of their reserves, as well as use the incentives to cover the full cost of the project. I should note that another thing that made this project really successful is they worked directly with an energy consultant / contractor, Carbon Zero Buildings, who has a very great sense of what's going on within the consulting and incentive market. And they were able to bring them in, you know, all the way from the start of planning, all the way through the end of construction. And consultants like that are really vital, especially when we're trying to do brand new pilot projects and try this for the first time in properties. As you can see here, they installed Sanco, like how Annette was talking about on her project, and they were able to utilize space within the parking garage to install those water heaters And then you can see there where the units are. What else did I want to mention? Because this was centralized water heating to begin with, and because there was only one system that was being electrified, the water heating system, there was no change in utility allowances. So in this case, it wasn't a situation where they had to re-examine who was paying for what in that case. The case study, if you'd like to learn more about it, including a little bit more of the details, is right here. And we talk a little bit more about what that looked like. A little bit of an aside on this one, because this is not about the water heating, but one of the things that was great is that they were able to move from in-unit radiant heating to heat pumps. And in this case, the residents then now have access to air conditioning, which they previously did not. You know, this property was developed in 1989 in San Francisco. Need for air conditioning at that point was minimal at best. But now as we have things changing, this was something that was important and was an actual benefit that they could bring to residents. Back to water heating, one thing to note that is typical, as you've heard across the other two presenters, is that there were some challenges, and commissioning was really vital in all of that when it came to making sure that the residents had the hot water when they wanted to have the hot water. So let's talk about another project where they actually had to do some changes around what residents were paying, and really think through things very critically. So this is our member Bridge Housing, and this property is based in Sacramento, California, serves 138 senior households. And it was built approximately 12 to 13 years ago using low-income housing tax credits. When they went to look to do some upgrades as equipment was nearing its end of life, they looked at the opportunity to upgrade the hot water system that was in there. As you can see, it was originally a gas water heater. And in this case, the gas water heater not only provided, you know, direct hot water in that regard, but also the indirect heat then also became how the apartment was heated as well. So this became a little bit more of a complex project. And one of the reasons why Carbon Zero Buildings and Bridge was able to make it happen so successfully and so quickly is that they were able to do a 1-unit mock-up to test out how switching from this gas water heater to this heat pump water heater would go. It allowed them to make sure that, you know, no problems on the electrical side, no problems in switching out that indirect heating via the gas water heater to the heat pump and all the things that needed to be done. And then by doing that and being able to phase the work across the 138 units, they were able to set up where they go in and you do 1 unit a day. And they make all of these upgrades. The residents may have to be out for that day, but that was it. So that really helped. There was no real relocation necessary, nothing like that. And it was an easy switch. They even kept the same thermostat so residents had that sort of, they knew what it was and how to utilize the system, even though it was new equipment. A couple of things to note that made this install go really well with the heat pump water heater is that they located, so this is an outdoor closet storage space, closet space off of the porch, the outdoor porch or balcony. And they were able to locate the heat pump water heater there. That helped in a lot of regards around reducing any noise complaints, which we have heard come up at other properties. When they had to secure the heat pump water heater for seismic purposes, they attached it to an exterior wall also to reduce vibrations. And then Carbon Zero Buildings also noted that they used a plastic pan instead of a metal pan, all in these efforts to reduce the potential noise complaint, which we do hear is a factor with heat pump water heaters, if not positioned correctly. So this was a great situation where they were able to test this out and do this work. A couple of things to note about these two previous examples that were shared, these are like the 5 to 10% 5 to 20% of the properties that are really primed right now to do this type of upgrade based on the equipment and the way the units are laid out and all of that type of work. So it's important to note that we're getting affordable housers comfortable with this new equipment where we're not hitting like really challenging situations. So it's nice because they can understand it, they can see the bills afterwards and all those types of things. So when it comes to utility allowances, we have done a case study on this as well, which I am putting in the chat right now. And that does a deep dive into how the utility allowances changed and also the NOI for the property. In the end, the residents were able to have their utility allowances increase slightly, even though we know that heat pump hot water heaters are much more efficient and therefore, they weren't actually probably going to be using their full utility allowance. But also because of the dramatic increase in efficiency and the removal of the gas systems, the affordable houser actually saved more than the utility allowances went up. So the NOI for the property actually was positive in the owner's calculations. And what we've seen actually as we've looked at the data afterwards is things are running pretty true to what was in the model. And then, so where are we progressing to now? Now that we've seen a couple of those case studies out in California, we're seeing this to start moving across the country. Again, we really need those incentives for those first times. So this is another case where one of our members, the community builders, is looking to upgrade their boiler equipment with a heat pump, centralized heat pump water heater. The project has not happened yet, but they are currently scoping out the work and have plans to make the upgrade. So this property was built in 1943, last renovated in 2009. And they have an end-of-life system that they need to replace. They're also facing building energy performance standards, and the property is currently not in compliance right now. So this is an important upgrade to make sure that they're not paying fines. One thing to note that may not be something that you're aware of, but often with affordable housers, they may have certain financing on their properties that doesn't actually allow them to recapture savings. So in this case, the incentives were vital because what this property has is what's called a cash flow loan on it. So any, revenue made sort of above the operating costs, like a portion of it is going to the lender of that cash flow loan. So any savings that are going to be achieved by the owner as they upgrade the centralized system is actually not always going to be retained by the owner. It's going to have to go back to whoever they're servicing their debt. So that's just something to note as we're thinking about affordable housing. It does get really complicated. You got to think about what the residents are paying, the owners are paying, but also like where is the extra dollars going to, if we are achieving savings. Most of these costs are going to be covered by the DC rebate program, and it was really important to have those dollars in there. And then I just want to share one last project because I think this sort of exemplifies what we're seeing now when we're talking about the tough buildings. So this is a high-rise 350 unit apartment building in Baltimore, Maryland. It's our community housing partner member who owns this property. It's very large, obviously centralized, and they recently renovated the building in 2020, including upgrading the system. They are going to have to figure out how to upgrade their hot water. It's currently gas right now. And so as we look to the future, like really thinking about how we help these buildings, in my mind, is sort of the next stage. We're seeing it happen in those smaller properties. We're seeing it happen in new construction. But how do we make sure we think about these properties that this is going to be a difficult one? Where are they going to put those new systems? How are they going to make sure sort of continuous supply? Because the idea of relocating 350 households is going to be just a non-starter at that point. So just to round it out, For our affordable housers, what we're seeing is that you need to start with the buildings where it's easy to make the transition. Let's try these ones first. Let's figure out how it works. And then we can move on to the more complex places. Mock-ups are vital, especially if we're talking about in-unit systems. And we encourage that any utility program, any state-run program allows for affordable housers and their consultants to do that work. And commissioning is just going to also be a necessity, as you've heard from everyone else on this call. You know, it's tough in new markets. So this again is why incentives are so important, because there isn't necessarily someone who's done this work before. And affordable housers haven't tried it. And it's, you know, it's different everywhere you go. And then the last thing is like, as you're thinking about working with affordable housers, you can't always rely on the savings as sort of the driver in all of this. We need to think critically about what is everything as far as residents, owners, and cash flow going to when we're thinking about the financial aspects of projects. And I will end there. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Lauren, for the detailed presentation. And yes, we do have questions, so you'll have to stay back. I'll be extending this session like 5 to 10 minutes for the Q&A. I will request my other panelists to please come on camera so that we can have a Q&A round. First of all, thank you so much, everyone, for all the wonderful details on the projects, retrofit, and new construction. So yes, we do have one pressing question, and that was, I'm going to break that into two parts, actually. So it's on financial resources. We discussed about like how we need a diversified financial pool to execute such projects, which is crucial, the point one. But there's a sub question to it, like how do you justify the financial investment? Because financial investment is the first part, but then when it comes to consumers, how are we justifying, like, with utility rates? Like, someone has a question like, in areas where gas is cheaper, how do we convince consumers like they have to make this transition to clean energy? I'd like to start with Lauren first. Michael and Anit, please feel free to chip in.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, as I mentioned, like we need incentives to kick this off. But then after that, what we're starting to see is that it is built into their project plan from the beginning. So, if you think about our member POA, like for all of their new projects that are coming online, they're just starting with the basics of their design being full electrification and passive house design. Did they start there? No, but like now that they've gotten the ball rolling, like it's been really great to see how they've been able to embrace that. And then through all of that, it's just been like they need to measure what's happening in practice. So all of our members also track all of their utility costs. They all utilize either like a third-party data provider and Energy Star portfolio manager at the same time. So they're also able to demonstrate that this isn't just like what's been modeled, but this has also become the reality as well.
And I do understand that this is also like slightly difficult to sort of like put forward that explanation to consumers, like, how they are justifying the conversion. Michael, on that front, how often do you engage for such projects with the residents to explain it to them? Like, when you're doing these kind of building electrification projects, what as a resident they could save on their utility bills, or like what difference would it make?
Yeah, fortunately on on the hot water side, the landlord typically pays for the hot water in our projects. So we haven't had that utility allowance issue. And I just want to go back to the overall cost of this. I think in our climate, in a cold climate, this is a demonstration project. So it costs a lot more to do heat pump hot water heaters than it does gas on the front end. On the operating, we're still seeing how that goes. But as there are more systems, the cost will come down. And, given, climate change, and we're not allowed to say that anymore, I guess, but given, the effects of carbon, I think we're all headed in this direction of systems that are, friendlier in that regard.
That is true. And I would like to also bring in Anit here. This was a beauty of Lauren's presentation. In a very subtle way, she pointed out split incentives, like talking about renters and landlords being involved. In new construction, Anit, did Tacoma Housing Authority have this like concern with like who is going to pay? Was this some factor that was considered when implementing this project?
No, I mean, so with a large tax credit project, right? Like you have a pretty large bottom line, of which this was just sort of part. And I think the bigger question is going to be about maintenance and how that goes. And it's a little early to tell.
Right.
But as far as the initial install, I mean, there's a big price tag on it. And I think the rebates help make that palatable. But again, it wasn't like we depended on the rebates to underwrite it, right? Like it wasn't like our lender and investor were looking at those rebate contracts trying to say, okay, yeah, we can put these systems in. But that's who's at the table is more the lender and investor when you're doing sort of a new build. And I think maybe if these were in unit,
Mm-hmm.
there would have been more of an emphasis on
Right.
the tenant side.
That's true. And this also like brings me to the other question that one of our participant had put for regarding like, if there wasn't any funding, like financial resources, implementing these projects would have been difficult, like, asking your consumers. But on that note, I want to add this here, like, when it comes to funding or any sort of resources on a regional scale, what barriers or like benefits do you see? Because you all represented different regions, like Northwest, Midwest, covering West and a bit of Northeast. So starting from you, Anit, what are the like your top two, the benefits and the challenges at regional level?
Well, the benefits, right? Like it makes it possible
Mm-hmm.
or at least palatable, I keep saying. Maybe we could have done it without it, but I don't know if we would have had the appetite to do it. And then the challenge is the coordination and the upkeep of sort of the measurement and verification and just getting everybody the paperwork they need.
But like otherwise, on a regional policy and program perspective, do you feel that there is enough support for executing such projects?
So THA is a pretty big houser. So
Hmm.
we have a lot more resources and pull and staff. Like I think it's really challenging for smaller housers. And I'm not sure. I think TPU did so much hand holding that it was a big help, but like I don't know how smaller housers are getting to the table with TPU, I guess is my question. And I think for us it's okay. I wonder about smaller developers.
Sounds right. And I
Yeah,
have the same question to Lauren.
I wonder about smaller developers all the time. I think that where you have a really good infrastructure that's been built up by the state or utility incentive programs, like we see this to be the case in California and Massachusetts and some other areas, like you also have the workforce, you have the consultants, everyone sort of knows how to navigate the system. Anywhere else, like it becomes difficult because you don't. Like Michael had Elevate, but an Elevate doesn't exist in every other part of in every region. So how do we make sure that like as we're thinking about these incentives being put in place, like Georgia has launched their multifamily rebate program.
Right.
How do we make sure that there's actually the people there who can do that work and support, especially those small affordable housers who some of them have never even seen Energy Star Portfolio Manager before.
Hmm.
Like, so they're sort of starting at the beginning, and really need that in-depth.
So there's like this gap, at least for like the smaller affordable housing providers, who even if you want to make that step forward for transition to clean energy, they really have to like have that sort of like stakeholder support to carry such projects forward. And Michael did very beautifully bring that out in his presentation, like how there's a larger portion of work that a stakeholder could take care of so that they could ensure that there is a building electrification project happening in one of the retrofit buildings. So yes, that was one of the questions that we had, and we also have a lot of questions in the chat. I would encourage you to like sort of have a look and see if there are any insights you could add. We are a little over time, so I would definitely like to wind this up with some key takeaways. Retrofit and new construction, they do have their own set of challenges and some positives that could really work in their favor, like space constraints, noise constraints, justifying the savings or in finding source like financial sources for this project. It's still an area that needs more work, understanding, and putting a step forward. But having said that, this technology works. This technology does work. It's just about time to sort of like understand different ways of how this could be installed in different regions, different building types, and what really works. It's just a simple thought process. Should not be that very difficult to implement. And on that note, before I wrap up, I also have to give an answer to one of the questions in the chat on the heat pump water heater costume that was there in Michael's slide. So my colleague Parth Burwell is the creative design and genius behind this heat pump water heater costume. So giving a big shout out to her because she did a stupendous job with this one. But yeah, on that note, thank you to all my panelists for really bringing out this fantastic projects, for this really simple conversation on making energy not just accessible, but affordable and throwing some light on the challenges. On behalf of my colleague Shannon, I would like to thank everyone who joined us today. Happy Monday and have a great rest of your day.